Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Winnie Sekar, and welcome to our very first Vibeinar by thevibes.com in support of International Women's Day 2021. I'm proud to be here today to address a prevalent issue of our time, one that has plagued our communities and hindered our efforts to become a truly progressive nation, that of gender equality. For the longest time, women of the world have sought to stand on equal footing as their male counterparts. Yet, despite decades of trying to instill awareness, we still continue to be underrepresented, stereotyped, objectified, or persecuted because of gender. Thus, gender culture in any given society define one's ability to take risks, make executive decisions, and to lead. Are we being passed over for promotions in favor of male colleagues because of cultural norms? We've led governments, climbed mountains, built sprawling cities, made discoveries in science, pushed the boundaries of every discipline, profession, and industry, and yet our impact on mankind pales in comparison to the battle we wage daily for what should be our equality, the right to be seen for who we are, appreciated for what we do, valued for what we've done, and supported for what we seek to accomplish in the future. Today, we are going to ask you to join us in taking this conversation deeper, to decide if women in Malaysia are truly empowered to live, work, and play as equals, or if we are in fact still waiting to be afforded the same benefits as our male counterparts. What do we still need to do to prove that women are just as deserving? On this note, let me thank you for joining and supporting this Vibeinar and for making this initiative a catalyst for social change. I would also like to thank our panel of speakers, my friends Nurul, Heidy, Kavita, and Ariff for sharing their time and lending their voices to this important issue. Without further ado, let me introduce our moderator for this evening, Shazmin, Shamsuddin.
Hello and welcome to the very first in a series of Vibeinars brought to you by The Vibes. I'm Shazmin Shamsuddin and I'm your moderator today for this discussion, Challenging Gender Inequality. Are Malaysian women truly empowered? Now, if you're watching to us via Zoom, we'll be taking questions. So do send us your questions to the Q&A co-hosts on Zoom and we'll be addressing those questions right after our little chat. And of course, if our original panel included businesswoman and socialite Kavita Quah, but sadly, due to unforeseen circumstances, she's had to pull out of today's session, and we send our deepest condolences on the passing of her beloved father. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists for today. To my right is Heidy Quah, founder and executive director of NGO Refuge for the Refugees. She's had over a decade of working with refugee communities here in Malaysia. She's also the first Malaysian to receive the Queen's Young Leader Award. And right next to her, of course, a very familiar face, we have Yang Berhormat Nurul Izzah Anwar, a member of Parliament for Pematang Pauh, also a human and civil rights activist and legislator. Next to YB Nurul is Yang Berhormat Senator Datuk Ras Adiba Muhammad Radzi, the first woman to be appointed chairman of Bernama. She is also a director, a producer, and a Malaysian Paralympic shooting athlete. So don't get on the bad side. And last but not least, the man who will answer all our questions about the workforce and women and all of that good stuff is Datuk Ariff Farhan Doss, Chief Operating Officer of the Human Resources Development Fund and the best person to address these questions. So, our theme for today, are Malaysian women really empowered today? This is what we're asking. And, all of you have sent in wonderful quotes about women and empowerment. And I must say, part of your quote, Ariff, was the fact that we're still having this discussion about equality proves that there is much room for improvement. Now, as the Chief Operating Officer for HRDF, you admit that these conversations are still ongoing. Why, though, in 2021, is this still the conversation? Surely by now we should be talking about, are we not doing enough to get the qualified people to fill these roles?
Right. I think I would like to answer that question. There was a quote that I read with regards to equality, and for women especially, whether it is attained either through an external force, or whether you use something that is known as external power, or whether it is attained through authentic power. And I would say that the conversation in most countries where the countries are still considered developing, women have to resort to external power to fulfill the quest for equality, rather than having to depend on what is known as authentic power, which must come from within, without having the need to impress, because it is already accepted. There is no requirement to prove oneself without having to resort to what is known as the external power. So you don't have to resort to your birthright. You don't have to resort to the fact that you come from a political elite family. You don't have to resort to the fact that you come from a corporate elite family. You don't have to resort to being part of a majority in a country, and so on. There is no need for the reliance if it is accepted that it doesn't matter which gender you are, the power comes from within, and therefore it is considered authentic enough not to have to prove yourself over and over again.
Right. Heidi, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think that is really powerful, right? Because a lot of times, we are defined based on, our cultural upbringing, or like, our background or ethnicity, and we're told that, I think a lot of times, people as a woman, people go like, oh, you're lucky, to be able to be getting these opportunities. But I tell them it's not luck, and I think it's really sometimes almost insulting that it comes down to luck, right? It's because we work hard for these opportunities. We don't get these opportunities because we are filling in a role for someone else. We get these opportunities because we work hard for it. And I think it's time for women to be acknowledged as that, Yeah.
Nurul?
Thank you, Shaz. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon, fellow panelists. I feel really blessed to be with all of you today. Heidi, Datuk Ras, Datuk Ariff. I think because we're about to celebrate Women's Day, and the question you raised reminded me of this term a couple of years ago in terms of the lottery of birth. When you talk about women, it's true, you have diverse backgrounds, but you can't really choose, right? And for someone who is a citizen of a country or a stateless person, sometimes it feels like because or by virtue of you being a woman, you face more challenges, whether intrinsically or externally. The point remains, the environment is not usually conducive for the growth of women. So for me, one crucial aspect is here we are, and not just here, everywhere people are celebrating and wanting to push for advancement of women, right? And not just women of a particular class or position. Yes. Some you're right, elites from the corporate sector, from the political sector, but women everywhere. So it's a good reminder as we take stock, that lottery of birth is really, for me, the most pivotal aspect. You cannot choose. And I feel very fortunate because here I am, able to articulate these issues. But if I was somehow, unfortunately, born in a war-torn country, I would not be able to expand the full potential that I have. And I think that should be a strong reminder, wherever or whatever position we hold, we must be mindful of ensuring other women, regardless of their background, receive the same opportunities.
Yes, indeed. YB, Ras, Adiba, I'm sure you want to add to that.
Okay, in my case, I think it's a bit different because I am a disabled woman. I wasn't born disabled and I became disabled halfway through my life. And I've actually experienced so many things, especially discrimination, not just because I'm a woman, but also because I am disabled. So that's across the board, whether you like it or not, it exists. and we can't just sweep it under the carpet. It exists, that's it. And one of the things that I was just, tadi bincang dengan YB Nurul is how we as OK women, sometimes people tend to indirectly put us down without realizing it. Like, oh, so you're OK, you're not able to do this, you can't work, you're not good enough, but how would you know if you do not give us a chance?
Yeah.
So really, celebrating this Women's Day is something that one of the things that we should be thinking about very seriously is actually how we support persons with women who are disabled, and how we can empower them. Otherwise we are not doing justice to ourselves and the humankind, and Malaysians as a whole.
But we've been having this discussion now for decades, and we're still, discussing the same issues. Why is it we are not able to go deeper and actually make constructive changes?
Shaz, I think actually if you talk about the choruses of voices, the chorus of voices that are speaking about this issue, as a legislator in Parliament, I sense there's this kind of growth and clamour for women's issues to be placed front and centre. If you look at New Zealand, what's the main defining overarching theme of the leadership of the government? It is to ensure a child is safe. Simple, right? But all the other government sectors, ministries and agencies are actually following to realize that agenda. So similarly in Malaysia, in a post-pandemic world, you see all the cracks, you see all the gaping holes that need to be filled up and improved. And I believe that's why, whether it's a sexual harassment act, I remember talking about this, but now at least people are saying, hey, when will the bill be introduced? So it's a lot of growth. That is a positive factor for me. Number two, in terms of domestic violence, that's taking place far worse during the pandemic. People are saying, what's going to be done? So you see on Twitter, younger generation, what Heidi's done. I mean, I feel there's growth. And people are also saying, with women getting enrolled in schools, in high schools far more than men, why are they being paid less? 6 ringgit less. And why are they not being considered? Because in this pandemic, they are the ones who will lose their jobs far easily. They are the ones who are far more vulnerable by being in the frontline sector, caregivers. And that brings into the offer of HRDF, like how do they make sure in terms of upskilling policies you can plug in and address the needs of women.
I think this is where you jump in, Dr. Ariff.
I just to continue from what YB said earlier, our problem.
Which one? There's two of us.
Challenges with regards to the empowerment of women is not just in Malaysia. It is a global problem. I want to quote a study that was done by Ipsos, because interestingly, the same 3 issues facing women in Malaysia are the same 3 issues facing women globally. Number 1, sexual harassment. Number 2, sexual violence, and number 3, sexualization of women in the media. So we in Malaysia, talking about Malaysia now, we are so multicultural, multiracial, we are so diverse. It being our strength in many areas is also our biggest challenge when it comes to addressing certain issues. Because each community has got different challenges that they have to take on head on before they can even come to a point of agreement with regards to ensuring that there are equality between women. Because even between the races and between the culture, there is so much division. So when YB talks about the introduction of a bill for the against sexual harassment, I think it's going to be viewed differently by the non-Muslim and the Muslim. There's probably going to be a lot of more support from either one or the other, and this is for all bills. To get everybody on the same page has always been a very rare issue in Malaysia. I think the Undi 18, to get youth from all, from across the board to agree to, was one very rare issue where we had legislator from across the divide coming together to vote. But other than that, when we talk about, for example, child marriages, for example, and we want to make it, we want to make sure that there's no child that is being forced into a marriage against the child's will. It's been such a challenge because we've got different cultural groups, different religious groups defending their position that the right to marry should not be, curtailed by one's age, for example, because of religious reasons. So, even when we want to craft out programs for any one race or any one gender or any one segment, we have to ensure that we first engage everyone across the board. Then, only then, and this is time consuming. It involves a lot of cost before we can introduce anything of any, benefit to any one group. So HRDF is no different than any other agency. Every time we want to introduce, we have to think of 100 different things of how people will react before we can introduce one, a program for even if you say we wanted to introduce a program specifically for women, we are definitely going to get some pushback from some other agency or some other groups of people, including politicians, who say they know you cannot discriminate against gender and whatnot. So it has always been a challenge for us in government.
So just a short response, if you don't mind, Datuk Ras. I actually wanted to say some optimism is required here. Why? Because first, you have the current Minister of Women, who is echoing also after clamour and some requests and some pressure, but the sexual harassment bill is there. Like, this is a great achievement. So it just requires an opening of Parliament, for example, to let it proceed. So it continues from the previous ministry, but the point is, it's there. I think that's something that we should celebrate, because before this, it's still being drafted. We're still going through stakeholders, engagement.
We are moving forward, which is really
absolutely
good. Yeah,
absolutely. And the second bit, which will be my last point, you talk about the problem of child marriages. Alhamdulillah, there was already a plan, a program by the previous minister and deputy to look at the causes of child marriages, and they came up with a 58 program across different agencies after the stakeholder engagement. So what I'm trying to say is, regardless of the government change, regardless of the portfolio change, you must ensure there's continuity, because some issues and some agendas are more important than the persons holding the post.
Though, in those programs?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think you're right. The secret in Malaysia is continuity. Like, can you audit? Can you follow up? The plan is there, but in terms of implementation, so I still think we've come sikit lagi. Yeah.
Slowly but surely.
Yes.
That said, though, in this current government, there are only 5 female cabinet ministers.
Yes.
Yeah. And the World Bank has urged Putrajaya to show urgency in undertaking reforms in the interest of economic equality between the sexes. So, do you feel that women leaders, are being sidelined, or is this a case of not enough capable candidates? YB Ras?
Well, okay, first and foremost, yes, we are being sidelined. I'm not sure why, especially now it's 2021. I think we all, minta maaf ya Datuk. I think we all should realize that a lot of women is doing well in schools, universities, and we have sought leaps and bounds. I think it's really about time that we step back, breathe, and look at the situation around us and say, hey, you know what? These guys, whether they're ladies, or not, they have it in them. They're very strong-willed, like what YB Nurul Izzah was saying, like, women, we do this, we do that, we do everything. Kita dah jadi macam sotong dah. We can do so many things, especially during this pandemic. Like I have friends who are parents of children with disability. My God, they have 3 kids who are OKUs in the house. They have to manage the house. They have to manage the biggest baby, which is their husband, who they adore. And they do so many things. and they still, some of them have work, some of them don't have work, they still at it. I think what we need to do is actually to open up our minds. It's not just women in general, but also disabled women.
Yes.
Why deprive
Across
us
the spectrum.
from being there? Why deprive us from excelling? You know, I'm very grateful, alhamdulillah, that I've been given this the task that I have been given. But I'm just saying that we should sit back and say, hey, why not?
Yeah.
These ladies are amazing. They're good at what they do. I mean, like, hello.
Yeah.
Yes, hello.
Like, hello. You know.
That said, how can we get more Malaysian women into political posts?
Okay, Vibeinar.
Oh, okay.
This is a question for Vibeinar.
I actually wanted to share in terms of sexual harassment, picking up from what Datuk Ariff said. It's true. There was a study back in 2016 by the Inter-Parliamentary Union, so it covers all the parliaments around the world, and it showcased 86% of female legislators have experienced one form of psychological violence, and 20% have faced sexual harassment. So it's a real thing. It's a real thing, global thing. And Malaysia, I have done.
I guess.
We're not unique to that.
No.
Certainly not. I mean, I can tell you that. But I think, of course, we need to do more, because it's only about 10% of Malaysian women as legislators. You know, but I think that's why more awareness in terms of, you know, when the different states, Selangor had at one point reached more than 30%, of women in the exco position. So it's like that kind of like realization and conscious action that you take to get things sorted. But having said that, and before I want to ask Heidy on her point, I mean, to add on, is it's not just giving women or driving them to choose a career-driven path. I think we can't be judgmental, or we think that, okay, all women want to work. I think it has to be an environment conducive for women to make that choice.
Yes.
Whether homemakers or whether full-time career-driven women, whether they feel that, you know, they want to participate and what they're differently able, they must be respected to make that choice. And the numbers showcase this will ensure society as a whole succeed.
Sorry, the word respect.
Yes.
That we don't have.
Yeah.
I am sorry.
Dignity. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Datuk. We are up there. You know, when we're given the chance, we're up there. You know, we sometimes, in reality, sometimes, you know, we're just like puppets. That's sad.
Yeah.
Why? I mean,
Yeah.
why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to be just a sort of
Figurehead.
We want to be
Kind
able
of
to make
a number.
decisions. Yeah, we want to be
Yes.
able to make decisions.
Fully empowered.
Not them having to question us. When yes, we have the ability. I mean, I'm very fortunate because I have a team of people who, women, men, and everything. But you know, I realize that sometimes they're like second, you know, they're guessing me. I'm like, why are you second guessing me again? Hello.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm
Did you not
doing
hear
what
me the
you
first
do.
time?
Yeah, you didn't hear me the first time. You know, like I'm sorry. I'm always going back to him. I'm sorry.
dia akan explain what HRDF is doing. Slowly, nak dengan lidah. Bola tanggung je kan.
No, but why second guess us? But
Yeah.
Why?
Definitely.
You've mentioned that this was an issue as well. I mean, being a young person in a position of leadership and decision making, you've also had people second guessing your decisions and your leadership.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of times it happens more often than not. You know, I've been to meetings, you know, where I get stopped halfway, and then a man comes in, you know, and repeat exactly what I said, and they get a lot of applause. And I'm like, I just said it first. That's my idea, right? And we've had that so many times, you know, being questioned. A lot of times it's just by like sometimes older men even. And so how do we actively create spaces for women to be heard, right? And I think what was really refreshing, you know, when talking to other women leaders about it was they're telling us that, I mean, we're just talking about how moving forward, you know, how do we as women bring other women on board with us as well, you know, to get their voices heard, you know, even as we have our voices heard. I think that's really powerful in so that more women are able to speak up, right? It's like once you have that platform, how do you pass that baton on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Before you ask, there's a famous quote by Madeleine Albright, which I think bears repeating. So there's a special place reserved in hell for women who don't support other women.
Yeah.
Now, I guess this also has to be asked: are men just not ready to recognize gender equality?
I think it depends on who's, with who you ask the question to, because there are different kinds of men. Some men who are confident, secure with their own position and their own gender, they've got no issue.
Yang insecure tu selalu begitu kan? So you are very confident and secure.
Yeah, I think because I don't have any hang-ups related to religion, to race, position. I don't allow my background and my history and my position in life to be an obstacle to me. To viewing each and every individual, each and every person as being equal, with the same rights, the same opportunity to excel. Because me personally, being an Indian, I come from a minority race. I have had my fair share of discrimination. I have been restricted. I've had my access to opportunities restricted just because of my lottery of birth, being an Indian and a minority in Malaysia. So I think if I don't understand what women go through in terms of discrimination, then there must be something very wrong, with the way that I was brought up and the way that I faced all this discrimination. So personally, I think there are many like me. I'm not unique. But having said that, there are a lot of Malay gentlemen who are the part of the majority of this country who are perfect gentlemen. And then when you look a bit deeper, it's because how their mothers brought them up. So I think that's very key in how a gentleman or man grows up to be a gentleman, is because he owes it to his mother.
Do you want to add something, Heidi? No. Okay, well, let's talk about women in the B40 category, also refugees and displaced women and those with disabilities. I feel that this group is the group that needs empowerment the most. So what can be done to move this forward and make this a reality, an achievable reality?
Yeah, I think first we need to understand their demographics and what they go through and why they're in positions that they are today. I think it's really powerful finding ways to give them a voice. A lot of times, if I as a Malaysian female think that I don't get a voice, and that's frustrating, that's even more so for the B40 communities and the refugee and migrant communities, right? And a lot of times, we think that, just because they are stuck in a cycle of poverty of sorts, that they will always be stuck there. So what's the point of giving them that voice? A lot of times they're discriminated against, saying that like, hey, you deserve that right because you didn't study hard enough, because you didn't work hard enough, because you're lazy, but that's the furthest from the truth. They are where they are today because of their upbringing in that sense. So how do we actively find a way to give them a voice to speak up, but also involve them in decision making? I think working across NGOs, what I often realize is that we tend to design a lot of programs, whether it's for the B40 community, or for the refugee or the migrant community, and we design based on what we think is best fit for them, without truly consulting them and understanding what is truly needed on the ground. So how do we start involving them in that decision-making process, right? To give them a voice and that place to design a solution that is effective and practical for them. How do we involve them in that decision-making process?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just want to add on to what Heidi raised. That's why when you talk about the year 2021, we can't assume. We can't make an assumption, generalization based on certain feelings or some sense or gut feel, whatever. I remember there was a 2018 Multidimensional Poverty Index study, and that looked at the database of EPF retirees in Malaysia. Not even those who don't have enough to save, and it showcased 84% of EPF retirees in Malaysia are recognized as multi-dimensionally poor. not just in terms of savings, in terms of access to education, in terms of access to home, transportation, and healthcare services. And majority are women. Meaning women are far more multidimensionally poor or deprived compared to men. And I think I'm trying to do this study in Permatang Pau, where we don't just include women in terms of the angle. We're including all households. And we're also including those who are stateless. Because sometimes we tend to feel, okay, we don't see them, or we just put them aside. They don't exist as part of our society. But our society is been backed up. Our economy is been backed up by people who are doing informal work or before in the construction. And we need to measure how deprived they are in order to implement our policies better and improve our country. So I think when you talk about 2021, it's not just about, okay, all this digital tech, using blockchain, it's great, Imas Jatra, but you also need to be high-tech in terms of how you measure poverty. It's not just the poverty line income alone, but it's also about looking at the different dimensions of a person's deprivation.
Okay. Now we have a question from a viewer. What do you say to those who say that women are being impatient for change, as the stats clearly show that strides have been made to improve gender equality in Malaysia?
Oh, empathy, kindness.
Let's absorb that question,
Let's
shall we?
Why are we being impatient?
Yeah, to see change.
Oh my God, it's been so long.
Yeah.
It did, again, this is 2021, for God's sake. Enough is enough.
Yeah.
I think this is the time for us to look at women in general and say, hey, why not? They're part of us. They're smart like us. They work extra hard, and they have to put up with a lot of things. Why not let them be where they should be?
Yeah.
We must already be up there. Our voices must be heard. We must be treated equally. We must be able to stand the same height as men stand. Yes, I understand. Because we being Muslims and stuff like that, there are ada kekangan. There are certain things that we can and we cannot do. But you know what? That's at home. But when we're outside, hey, look at us in the eye. We work 300 times harder because we have to prove ourselves. Why? That's just talking about general women. What about disabled women? It's even worse. I have friends who are professors, who are doctors, who are really, really qualified, and when they come out and they want to get jobs, they go for job interviews, they just reject it because they're disabled. I mean, like, what in the world is going on?
Okay.
What are you guys thinking about?
Right.
Okay,
Datuk Ariff,
before
I just wanted, since we were talking about, women being impatient for change, what are your thoughts on that? I mean,
let me give some context. I refer to there's this global gender gap index, and Malaysia has its own, the Malaysian Gender Gap Index. The last one was published in 2018 by the Department of Statistics Malaysia. And the score, a perfect score would be a score as close as possible to 1, which is equivalent to 100%. And globally, we are ranked 64th in the world as compared to the previous 2 years. And of course, the study said that we probably did very well. That particular in 2018 is because thanks to probably YB Nurul Izzah's mother being the Deputy Prime Minister at that time. Because we have never scored as high as, because there are 4 sub-indexes. One of it is political empowerment, and in 2018 we scored 0.067, and the reason being, the involvement of women at that time. But the other 3 sub-indexes, one is economic participation and opportunity. The second being educational attainment, and the third, health and survival. Women, the gap was the least for educational and attainment, where women did even better than men, so that the score was 1.054 for that particular index. Economic participant and opportunity, not too bad, 0.727. So the worst being political empowerment at 0.067. So what I'm trying to say here is there has been a lot of progress. Every decade, women in Malaysia, have progressed a lot. But if you look at the statistics, there's still a lot of improvement. When it comes to education, we have managed to do very well. Women have equal access to education generally. But as the type of education they choose is still a problem, and this is not just a Malaysian problem. We find that women are not as much involved in education in the subjects for engineering, mathematics, science, STEM. Yeah? So in Malaysia, it is similar. The participation of women in those areas, the STEM areas, are far lower than the ones for men or boys. At HRDF, we have a similar problem. We've got many different initiatives for upskilling and reskilling. Women generally are equal in a lot of areas, except to the areas of the high skill areas. Women generally, women's participation in those programs are very, very low. It's either they themselves are not participating in these programs because they themselves have made a decision not to, or employers are not sending them for those high skill areas. The highest participation by women in our initiatives is for B40 and gig. And this will of course involve courses for baking, cooking, floral arrangement and whatnot. So this one, women, they score higher than men for participation in upskilling programs. So there is still a lot of room for improvement. We have to find out why is it that women are not being involved in programs for STEM.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
As an engineer, I have to say, I remember one of the key things that mattered for us to join the workforce, because some have opted to continue with their family life, bring up their children. But if you compare to our Western counterparts, it's a lot harder for you to take time off. It's like a never-ending rat race if you join to proceed or to progress your career. And once you take time off, it's like as if the handbrake has turned into a permanent retirement scheme.
Yeah.
So I think HRDF has a huge opportunity. I was told you reserve 10% of some of your schemes for upskilling, but in terms of a whole, from birth to retirement, look at how a woman can upskill herself over the years. It's quite crucial to make the opportunities more apparent. Yeah. Similarly, like I have a lot of friends, in engineering department previously, but when there's not much flexi work hour policy, then you're less likely, right? It's either or, it's a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
And it's highly stressful. They found the women who have the highest degree of mental stress are the ones who have to upkeep. You have to maintain. There's so much expectations to be perfect, to look, your best, to manage your children, to manage your career. So I think it really requires a systemic look. How do you make sure women join the workforce? Even at the higher skilled level. And I just wanted to add the last bit, which is quite important. When the question was asked, why are you so impatient? I think I'm trying to empathize with that question, but for me, we're just depending on data. We're not trying to be emotional. The data showcases the need to push. The data showcases how much society can prosper if you empower women. So we're not even saying things or because trying to be arrogant about it. Not at all. It's just looking at the evidence-based requirement and request.
Yes.
Before I forget, if I just to add on to what YB Nurul Izzah said earlier, we are working very closely with Talent Corps. HRDF is working very closely with Talent Corps. They have a program called Women Returning to Work, and they do the identification and they do the strategizing and the conceptualizing. HRDF provides the fund for upskilling and reskilling for women who may have been away for a period of time but need to be reintegrated at work, and they may have a skill gap that they need to close, and HRDF has put aside funds for that as well.
Okay. Now, still on that topic, I suppose. I mean, my question is companies, big companies, small companies, do you feel that companies are reluctant to hire women? because of various issues, including the need for us to juggle so many roles.
Right. Since you've given me an opportunity, I want to put on record that HRDF has probably done better than many other government agencies. Okay. We have 40% women on the board, and 50% of the management are women in HRDF. So,
well done.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So, thank you for giving me the opportunity to put that on record. You know. No, but answering your question, you see, I suppose it is at the different levels that different decisions are made with regards to how well a woman can function because of the women needing to take time off because of her other responsibilities. It is at the higher levels, it is at the management level that these considerations play a more important role than for other positions. At the lower levels, at the clerical level, at the secretarial level, at the operational level, we do not see this as being an issue because generally there are more women doing those work than there are men. But when it comes to the management positions, higher management positions, then there's always this consideration. And of course, when we engage employers, we engage decision makers within companies, there's always this concern that when they invest in women in certain positions, they want to make sure that there's an ROI on a consistent basis to the company year long. You know, they don't want to have to invest and then the woman makes a decision because the woman wants to go take care of her family or wants to take time off, you know, to give birth and so on. So, of course, this is not backed by data, but yet there seems to be this general stereotyping of investment, why investment should or should not be made on women.
It's something we all feel and know in our hearts, but you know, we can't really say it's, you know, we're given other excuses or justifications, I suppose. Now, let's talk about the gig economy. You know, this pandemic has kind of pushed forth a lot of opportunities for people to engage in the gig economy. But is this necessarily a good thing for women? What are your thoughts, Heidy?
I think I see it, I mean, it's good and bad in many ways, right? I think good in a sense where I see so many more women from the communities that we serve stepping up and starting up their small businesses. You know, and you know, in today's time and age, you know, with everyone being online, it's so much easier to push sales out. It's so much easier to share your products in that sense. And so I think, you know, it's great that women are being given that chance to be involved in gig economy, right? But also understanding that, you know, they're in it only because their current source of income is not enough, yes. Right? So why do they have to take on, you know, more than a job? You know, they have to take on, you know, their day jobs, and then, you know, take care of their families, and then take on like an extra night job, you know, by selling things online or baking cookies to sell. Is it really not enough that they're doing? So I think it's a concern to look at, you know, why do women feel that, you know, what you're receiving in your companies is not sufficient to help them support their families.
Yes, Datuk Ariff.
No, with regards to your question, you know, the very nature of a gig job in that it's flexible and it accords a lot of freedom to the individual to decide on how much time the person wants to accord to that particular job. It's probably why a lot of women are doing a lot of gig work at the moment, because, you know, there's this it accords them the opportunity to pick the amount of hours they want to put in, and also gives them the freedom to be able to allocate the hours in a day according to, you know, for the family, you know, and for other factors.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but of course we understand that there are a lot of security issues. Because if the environment is not right, then gig work can be very dangerous. You know, especially certain types of gig jobs. So we are looking at developing policies to address those challenges, to make gig work more friendly for women, and to ensure that their security is taken into account when companies that offer these gig jobs, they must take into consideration all these other challenges that women especially probably face more than men.
Absolutely.
I mean, and if I may add something, I think like I mean, just the conversation that we're having today, right? Just women in leadership and, the different concerns that are taken in place when they get considered for roles in leadership based on what they have to manage at home, and for gig work, the flexibility. And I think this word comes so often, right? But it's almost, I mean, and I might be wrong in this, it's almost as if you're placing all the expectation on women to hold the fort at home. I mean, and why are we not expecting the men at home to hold the fort as well, to take up equal responsibilities? I mean, women give birth, but a man plays an equal role in housekeeping, in raising a child. Why do we place all the expectation on just women? And is it fair that we do that, and then think women are not capable enough? I mean, yeah.
That's a very good point. YB?
I think, it's not just requirement in terms of policy, but we do need to take into account existing cultural norms. I mentioned, in my deliberation on the ground, it is a challenge sometimes when you want to implement the 30% quota for women to be implemented as ahli majlis, or even as in the Majlis Pengurusan Community Kampung, because then the men who were used to holding these positions in a more rural setting feel that they are being challenged, that where's the role for them. So dignity in everything that we do is important, where you increase the degree of engagement, because you need to win over people. The early reason why Grameen Bank was so successful was again because of the husband factor, or the male household, the male-headed household, who are supportive of the women getting the grant and proceeding with their work. Now, in terms of gig economy per se, it is precarious. It is the future. You're flexible. No, everyone's so used to working without a boss. Yeah. I mean, no one wants to report to the boss anymore, because it's true. In a pandemic, right? You feel that, hey, I have my time, I have to plan. There's a lot more degree of proactiveness and kind of placement on scheduling. But as of December 2020, these are MDEC figures, only 7% are protected by SOCSO.
Yeah.
Meaning, if they, these women meet up with an unfortunate, with an accident or something bad happens to them, they're not protected. So I think the bigger issue when we talk about the gig economy, how can the government consider, okay, this is going to happen, it's going to hit people are interested, so you kind of prepare for the future. Yeah. You need to push together with, of course, companies for them to protect and to have a clear-cut protection for like a social safety net. Yes. Yeah. This is the main reason that for Ayasuri, when the previous Deputy Prime Minister was introducing it to housewives. Again, it's about how can the system catch you when you fall. Yeah. Because you will fall with the current economic pandemic, but how will the system assist you? Even the UK is talking about up to 80% of wage subsidies. So the world is changing. We've got to make sure that Malaysia also does more, of course, to protect those in need.
Yeah. Are Malaysian employers willing to encourage women empowerment through flexible working arrangements?
I think one of the silver linings of the pandemic is that employers recognize the need for employees to be able to work from wherever they are. So work from home is now more accepted than it was previously, because Malaysian employers, we had to. Yeah. But Malaysian employers tend to be very, very, very conservative compared to our compatriots, especially the more developed countries. It was always frowned upon because Malaysian employees are not seen as being disciplined, not being seen as productive if there is no supervision. Mm-hmm. But the pandemic has managed to change the minds of a lot of employers. And I know for a fact, for example, I keep bringing up Talent Corp. I shouldn't, because I should speak more about HRDF. But Talent Corp has, Talent Corp has very consciously made a decision that from this year onwards, they're going to make sure that all their employees, all Talent Corp employees, can work from home if they so chose to. Okay. So that is a conscious effort and direction on their part, and we at HRDF are hoping to follow suit as well. So we hope that we provide an example for all other employers out there, that with the proper training, with the proper reskilling, upskilling and whatnot, I think a lot of employees can be as productive, if not more productive, working from home.
Right.
Sorry, I just want to share something.
Yes.
We're talking about working from home, during the pandemic, and OKUs have always been working from home. You know, we don't know how else to do it. I mean, out of maybe 10 of us, only maybe 3 is working. The rest have to do things on our own. So, you know, we're used to it.
Do you think more can be done to encourage, OKUs to take up the gig, to get involved?
Yes, a lot more can be done, but of course, you know, not many of us can afford the gadgets that we use. Not many of us are savvy with technology. You know, we don't know this and that. So it's very important that we train them. So that is why we're working very closely as well with HRDF, because they are supporting colleges to come up with all sorts of courses for the disabled, which is really, really good. Like I said, we've been doing this for yongs already, you know, but it's wonderful to see everyone picking it up, you know, and going ahead and moving forward. That's really, really good. But like Nurul Izzah was saying, safety net too is really important. Yeah.
At HRDF, we have a program called OTAP, which is OKU Enhancement Training Program. This is meant for the differently abled individuals. Not only do we provide the training, but we ensure that there's an allowance for every trainee for at least a 3-month period. This is to ensure that they can, you know, they're not burdened by the time they take off from work to be able to do this training. So we're working very closely with Datuk Adiba to make sure more individuals, you know, differently abled individuals come forward to benefit from this training.
A question from a viewer. A lot of gender inequality issues are rooted in patriarchal tradition. How can we cut off this practice that strongly is accepted, I suppose, in our society, according to this viewer, especially when it comes to, you know, the various religions, races, and traditions that we all, you know, live with? Why be Nurul?
So anyone? Okay,
please,
so
please.
I always like to look at it because my intention is for this nation to be more centered on kindness and compassion. It's how I want my children to kind of, you know, live and inherit this world that I'm leaving them with. And one of the key things in this aspect is to have, yes, the punitive approach, you know, the laws, but you also have to have that persuasive approach. Like bullies, they were bullied themselves before. So similarly, a completely egotistical or misogynist, I'm sure it also came very much from their previous upbringing. So I think both these approaches, you know, a whole look at how we can continue to engage, and of course, this includes from the religious authorities. I think I know now it's much easier. I remember like even talking about the methadone program for heroin addicts to be done in mosques. So I started with the Mufti Wilayah and Mufti Pulau Pinang, and I realized, you know, eventually they had a muzakarah of ulama who came together. Hey, harm reduction is the way to go. You know, you can't just expect. Of course, it's a bit different, but the point is, even for elevating women, one of the key things in Islam that has given me a lot of hope is the fact that men and women are the same in the eyes of God, except for the degree of piety. So that drives me forward. You know, it's like, in a sense, we keep having to cajole and encourage this more kind of empathetic view of one another. Of course, there's crazies out there. I'm not going to deny that. There are. So that's why the punitive approach. But you also need to get people together lah. And I'm a firm believer that we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Does Malaysia need youth, you know, young women to start defending the destiny of women and the strength of women themselves? Heidi?
Yeah, I mean, most definitely. I think I look at my peers and I am just mind blown by the bravery and courage of young women these days in speaking up about important issues that needs to be addressed. I think more than ever, the positive thing that we've seen over the past 2 years is young women stepping forward and having a voice and speaking out and really powerfully coming together to have each other's backs by sharing each other's stories or forming support networks, for survivors of sexual harassment, for example. So I think more than ever we need more young women to step forward, and we need our fellow comrades, and male counterparts as well to hold that space, to hear women out, and not just, not just on International Women's Day, but on every day as well. I mean, for me, International Women's Day has been like it's great, but I'm like, and I am really thankful, for all that happens throughout the week to celebrate women, but I feel that it can't just happen in March. It has to happen throughout the year. Yes. And how do we keep this conversation going?
Every day.
Every day.
Celebrated every day.
Yeah.
Well, many men want to support the women's movement, and the women's right to vote was made possible by support from men pushing this forward. However, today many men feel threatened, not because of women, but from the women's movements that have moved from fighting for equal rights to them perceiving it as a man-hating kind of thing. What are your thoughts on this? YB?
So I just, the key center point of governance of our policy has to be focused on dignity.
Yeah.
And so even for the men, if it's seen as a zero-sum game where you displace them to the point that they feel they are completely immobile, they are completely debilitated, I think that's also unfair and unacceptable. Mm-hmm. So having a look, even in the elderly in my constituency, they feel that they have a role still to play and contribute to society. So you have to be able to place people accordingly to their talents to contribute. And once that happens and they understand the rationale of empowering women, they understand the rationale of how we can really fully realize the potential of different subsets and groups, then you'll get somewhere. But it's a long-term process, right? You can't expect things to be immediately changing next month, but you must have a concrete plan getting there. So the numbers game sometimes have to be monitored. Whether the global gender gap, it has to be monitored. So as long as you think about dignity, I keep talking about prison reform, a lot of female prisoners are terribly left behind. So that's why when you put dignity, even for the person who has committed crimes, it is easier for you to understand and implement policies that affect everyone as a whole. Senang dia cakap, we're outside prison tau. Kita senang cakap, we haven't suddenly found ourselves doing something, committing a terrible crime, maybe by accident or whatever. The point is, it really, sometimes, when people don't understand, why are you always focusing on those behind bars? Because the vulnerable segment, when you have a conscious thinking about how to solve that complex problem, you then find the ease of which to solve all else.
Yes, Datuk Ariff.
I wanted to say all these feminist movement, these global movements are relatively new, and in defense of men, we are in really very unfamiliar ground. We're still learning. For example, there are certain questions that you ask, I want to chip in, and I have to be careful that I'm not being accused of mansplaining, for example.
Mansplaining.
So there are certain things that that we were able to do before. Now I'm not so sure.
Actually are thinking about it. Would I be mansplaining if I said that you're thinking about it's progress? Actually,
I think it's progress.
So I think we need to maybe cut a little bit of slack for.
Can you say that? I don't know.
There's room for improvement.
Yes, all round. Yes, correct.
Okay, I want to move on to a topic that I feel has to be discussed. It's online behavior, media. I guess the internet and all that goes on there. It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? On one hand, we use online and the media to highlight issues of disparity, issues of sexual harassment, such as that recent case, of the roadblocks. And then we see an increase as well, a sharp increase in cyberbullying and threats towards women. In fact, Heidi, you were a target of that in 2020 during the pandemic when you highlighted issues that the refugee community were going through. And I think you, YB Nurul Izzah, you also have people commenting about your appearance, and this is just not needed or wanted, and yet it happens. And it's, how do you change this behavior? How can we kind of evolve beyond this kind of low-level trolling?
I think we need to start calling it out and not giving, not hiding their names. And what I do these days is that each and every time, or sometimes, when I get like really terribly nasty comments, I will call them out in public. If you have the guts to message me on my inbox, you better have the guts to be able to let me hold you accountable in public, and put your name out there. Sometime last year, at the peak of my cyberbullying, at one point I was getting about 100 messages a day, with rape threats and death threats and threats towards, my family members, calling me all things from Cina Babi to Pengkhianat Negara to, at one point I think this guy just went, go hang yourself, and that exact, go hang yourself, was piercing to me, because I was, really struggling with my mental health at a point of time. And I know that if I wasn't already seeking help, reading a statement like that might just drive me to the brink, of jumping off a building. So I remember posting it up, on my social media page just to raise awareness that we have to be very careful about cyberbullying, because it can go one step too far, and we've seen it happen time and time again that people have committed suicide, from cyberbullying. But in posting that out, so many people came forward. People were really kind, and I'm thankful for that. But there were also people that were telling me that, what, Heidi, you shouldn't be calling him out. You should be more forgiving towards his behavior. You should have maybe blanked out his name. But I'm like, I will not blank out his name if he came into my inbox to tell me to go hang myself. I will not cut you that slack. So how do we now move forward to call people out and hold them accountable for their words that can be really detrimental. And I think our law enforcement system needs to look further into cyberbullying, right? I think what's really troubling is that we pick and choose, when it comes to cybersecurity, what we want to report and what we want to. I mean, I myself was investigated last year when I spoke up about issues in detention centers, right? But so so that happened. But at the same time, where was that protection when I step forward and go like, hey, I got these death threats, hey, like I got these rape threats, why isn't cyberbullying looked into that way? And I think there has to be better policies, to hold cyberbullies accountable, because everyone hides behind the keyboard and the screen these days, right? And how do we have better systems, whether MCMC or Facebook or Instagram, to make sure that people don't hide behind fake profiles, right? It shouldn't be a thing that people can use fake profiles, or people can go around making 10 different Facebook profiles.
I think Heidi's experience should really hit home the need for us to understand the state's role in providing sufficient protection. I remember forcing my children to watch The Social Dilemma. I mean, aside from it being very entertaining, I think it really showcases the crucial role that the state can play. When you talk about cyberbullying, when you talk about even how can the police protect victims of sexual harassment, bullying, the head of the D11 unit, the Women, Child and Sexual Investigations Division, she herself stated to me that we are in the we're in the process of promulgating a new law to manage cyberbullying, meaning it's not there, it's not sufficient. One. Number two, D11 is severely underfunded. So even you need sufficient funding, you need to reorient focus, that this will be the battlefield for the future. That's why, as in the last parliamentary session, one of the other things is not just one bit. One is, proper regulation, proper action taken to protect victims. Number two is to decriminalize the attempt of suicide.
Yes, yeah.
So I think, once we understand the role of the law or the authorities, then we can start first strike fear in people, and who are wrong, deeply in the wrong, and then number two, you can craft kind of programs to engage, to support. But if you don't have that punitive foundation, people are not going to be scared. In the fact that she has had to go through this, I mean, honestly, even for me, right, because our mind is not conditioned to face thousands, hundreds of attacks. The human mind, it has its own limitations. So the state must understand, when we talk about social media, to also see the psychological limits that we are faced with. If not, how do you expect to do your job or live your life normally?
Yes.
So I think it's a really important point. Parents out there have to understand the limits, and companies like Facebook must be held accountable.
All right. Now, of course, we have gone beyond our 1 hour,
yeah.
but that's fine. We're receiving a lot of questions via our Zoom co-hosts, and one question from a viewer states that back in 2016, the Women, Family and Community Development Minister at the time announced that Putrajaya was working to introduce a Gender Equality Act to deal with discrimination against women. So fast forward 5 years, we have yet to see the act enacted, even when Pakatan Harapan took over the government in 2018 with a female deputy prime minister. Lackluster efforts were made to see this act through. Are women's issues not taken seriously, even by other women? What are your thoughts on this?
You want me to add that, or you want to?
I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
Because even right now, we are working very, very hard. I'm speaking on behalf of the Women's Ministry, and especially, pertaining to the disabled. It's a tad slow, but it's getting there. I don't think it's fair to say that we women are not fighting for it. We are, but perhaps. I shouldn't be saying this. You should be saying this.
It's okay. I mean, like I said, all of us are stakeholders.
Perhaps I think what we need to do is just keep at it. Just keep coming out. Voice out. Rant out if possible. To make sure that voices are heard, especially women who are disabled. If we do not show ourselves, if we do not tell people this is the situation, then people will take it slow, because it's not affecting them. So it's not that it's not moving. It's just that I feel that it's a bit slow. But all of us here, including him, I'm sure, we would like to see women protected. We would like to see issues of women being upheld, and we are all empowered.
So
talking about an introduction of a legislation or an enactment in Parliament, I think is the limitation is there's always this numbers game, and I think you need the numbers in Parliament to be able to push through any intended law. And I think in the coalitions that we have, in both the coalitions that we have had, there is always one party that's always afraid to be the one that is the most progressive when it comes to talking about equality of women's rights. And I think that is why I think whichever coalition is in power, I think this issue of not having enough numbers to push through something as progressive as that will always be a challenge.
I think it's important to take stock of the feedback, criticism, because I understand the frustration of JAG, of many women's groups who have worked very hard on the various bills. And then, of course, take into account and take stock also of the bottlenecks that exist in our system. If you look at the statement made by the previous Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Women, it was about to be introduced in Parliament, the sexual harassment bill, about to be kind of brought by the executive, because you can't bring it up as an opposition or private members private member of parliament. However, of course, the change of government took place, yeah, and due to the pandemic and many other reasons, we have not had the bill come to fruition. So one of the key bottlenecks, I feel, in my view, is the failure to frontline women's issues, frontline gender equality across all ministries and governments. So it's not just the women's ministry. If you talk about child marriages, it is incumbent on the home ministry because the laws are under their purview. I remember. So sometimes you expect the women's ministry to hold the fort, but don't ministers? Yeah,
It's a teamwork.
It's a teamwork,
Yeah.
and also a lot of the legislation falls under a different ministry.
Precisely.
So we're trying to say, hey, like Datuk Ariff, look, you have daughters, you have a wife, you have sisters, you are amongst women. These are issues affecting all of us. So every single member of parliament, regardless of their gender, would have to support this one. So it's that kind of frontlining which I feel is necessary before bills can be passed. Now the other bottleneck, I was just coming from a meeting with Datuk Azalina, who's the head of the APPGM, All Party Parliamentary Group on Prison Reforms, and the structure is the Attorney General's Chambers will be the one finalizing the wording of a particular law. So we do need to find ways whereby sometimes it can take 6 months to a year. The commas must be placed properly, the wording must be chosen accordingly.
Like a lot of red tape.
Exactly, but it's real.
It takes time. People think it's kejap.
But it's not. So I just realized this, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So perhaps that structure has to be taken into account in order to move things faster. So when you talk about even now, they're looking at the Social Worker Act, so that you can upgrade, empower, and remunerate social workers much more. So it's going to go back to the bottleneck AGC. So maybe we also need to find ways whereby you understand the context of the law before you focus on the wordings. And this is what Dr. Azalina shared with us. I mean, I must give credit to her. She's the one who said this was the thing that was we faced for years. So I guess even from this government, same thing, we have to assist and also pressure for these bottlenecks, bureaucratic bottlenecks, to be addressed. If not, we're never going to see the laws that are really in need to be implemented. I think sexual harassment is less controversial. As in you will get the approval of many legislators. I saw a few members of parliament, ministers even saying implement it now, which I think is a good thing. So focus on the low-hanging fruits, but also focus on the legal bottlenecks that need to be fixed.
All right. Now, of course, we only have 10 minutes left for our discussion this morning for a Vibeinar. So before we wrap up, I just want to know, Malaysian women, no matter what demographic or socioeconomic background we come from, we all have aspirations. What can we do to make sure that we all have the opportunities to achieve what we aspire to? Heidy, why don't you go first?
I think we need to stop defining women and telling them what they can and cannot do. We need to stop setting limitations for women as well and kind of putting them into a box. We should kind of open up the opportunity, right, for them to truly discover what they want to do and then find ways to champion and support them through creating those network and opportunities to get their ideas and their thoughts heard out there.
Yes, Nurul?
I feel that this pandemic has really unraveled so many complex challenges and vulnerabilities that have been suffered, that people have been suffering, segments have been had to grapple with for so long. It's such an opportune time really for us to welcome all sectors, men especially, to be partners in righting the systemic flaws. Even getting the vaccines across. It just, for me, it's very something that's very emotional, because while I would say, seemingly normal individuals face mental challenges, sometimes in an MCO you feel depressed or down, not able to socialize and mingle with others. How about those who are differently able? How about those with children who have needs beyond, your usual comprehension?
Yeah.
So it is a partnership that needs to be done because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And that would be my reminder to everyone.
Yeah.
YB, Datuk Ras?
Well, you know what? I think we just need to be there for each other. Work as a team, men and women. I don't think we should say, oh, women is like this, or men's like that. I mean, now what's been happening since last year, I think it should put us in a position where we realize that no one's indispensable. Anything can happen to anyone, like what Nurul Izzah was saying, with the pandemic, the rich can get ill, the poor is getting poorer. We need to be kind. Empathy is very important. We need to be there for each other and look at each other in the eye and say, hey, you're okay. And hey, don't mess. Don't mess, don't bully, don't mess. I tell my disabled friends, come out, show up. Be there. Let people see you and be proud of yourself. Stand up and look at them in the eye and say, I exist. Because that's what we do. I exist. And to all the men that's watching this, I just like to say thank you because you've been there for us, some of you. You've been very supportive and I just like to say, let's work as a team and just move forward. And we're special like that, but you need us. You need us.
I worked under a lady boss for 20 years. I think YB Nurul Izzah knows her, which is why I was surprised. There was a 2015 study done by HRDF among women employees. And 80% of them said they preferred a man as a boss rather than to work under a woman. So I think for things to change, women must first support women. And this stereotyping of women by women must change first before you can expect men to make the change that you require. Sure. Agreed. Sure.
Well, that's actually really food for thought, isn't it? I mean, we have to be kind to each other, but women must lift up other women.
Thank you, Moderator Shaz, for doing this as well.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon on the few days before International Women's Day. And of course, women's empowerment is a discussion that's been ongoing for hundreds of years, actually 100 years plus, and for decades in our country. And it's about time this discussion went further, went deeper, with some real change and willpower to drive change so that we'll see positive changes in our society. And of course, our workforce and our government for the women and the men in Malaysia. So I would like to thank once again our panelists this afternoon, YB Nurul Izzah, YB Datuk Ras Adiba, Heidy Quah, and of course Datuk Ariff. Thank you so much for joining us today. And this is the Vibes' very first Vibeinar series, and we want to wish you, all the women in Malaysia, happy International Women's Day in advance.
Thank you, the cameraman as well, making sure that we look okay.